When I first got diagnosed with bipolar, my first response was, what does that mean?
Delonte West's fall from NBA stardom is unlike anything you've ever seen. From hitting playoff game winners next to LeBron to being found unconscious on a roadside, needing 2 doses of Narcan just to keep breathing. And it all starts with a prayer on a hospital floor. Here's his story. The kid who turned pain into buckets. There's a certain kind of story that the internet loves to devour, chew up, spit out, and then come back for seconds. And that's the story of a man who once had it all, who stood shoulder to shoulder with the greatest basketball player on the planet, who cashed checks worth millions of dollars, and who, by every measurable standard of success in modern American life, had absolutely made it. And then, piece by piece, layer by agonizing layer, watched it all crumble into dust. But before we talk about the fall, because trust me, the fall is brutal, and it is relentless, and it is the kind of thing that will genuinely wreck your whole mood, we need to talk about where this man came from. Because the tragedy of Delonte West doesn't start with the viral videos. It doesn't start with the mugshots. It doesn't start with the panhandling photos that broke the internet. It starts with a kid from Prince George's County, Maryland, who used a basketball the way most of us use therapy, or music, or late-night doom scrolling as a way to survive. Delonte Maurice West was born on July 26, 1983, in Washington, D.C., and grew up in poverty in Prince George's County, Maryland, in what he later called a happy poor household, bouncing between homes and family members after his parents divorced. His mother worked multiple low-wage jobs, government work, bagging groceries, even a hotel receptionist gig, just to keep food on the table. And look, there's a version of this story where that's noble and beautiful, and the kid rises above, and he did. But there's a darker layer underneath all of it, because Delonte wasn't just dealing with being broke, he was dealing with something far more corrosive. See, Delonte is of mixed African American, Native American, specifically Piscataway, and white heritage, and that combination gave him light skin and reddish hair that made him a constant target for bullying. Kids clowned him for his big ears, a mole on the back of his head, a birthmark below his lip, even a speech impediment. And this wasn't just playground teasing. This was identity-level rejection, the kind that rewires a kid's entire sense of self-worth. He later identified that self-loathing, not bipolar disorder, not anything clinical, was the real core issue that haunted him his entire life. But here's the thing about Delonte. He found an escape hatch, and that escape hatch was basketball. The court was the one place nobody could laugh at him, the one place where all that pain transmuted into something productive. And then, in 8th grade, around 1997, when he was about 14 years old, a leg injury took that away from him. He stopped going to school. His mother, overwhelmed and out of options, sent him to live with his father in rural Louisa County, Virginia. And that's when everything detonated. West himself later pinpointed this exact moment as when he, quote, first kind of spiraled downhill. He started cutting himself. He started abusing prescription pills, medications with names he couldn't even pronounce. He cycled in and out of children's hospitals. He made multiple suicide attempts, multiple, as a teenager. And in one particularly devastating moment at a hospital in Cumberland, Maryland, he was ready to end it all. But instead, he dropped to his knees and prayed. He made a deal with God right there on the hospital floor. Let me survive. Get me to the NBA, and I'll glorify your name. And somehow, against every single odd stacked against him, basketball pulled him back from the edge. Now, years later, looking back on all of it with the perspective of a grown man, West would try to reframe some of those darkest moments. He once reflected, calling that period of his life basically crying for attention and admitting, at 31, you say, what the hell was I doing? Looking back now, you just think, I was a spoiled brat. But make no mistake, the trauma was real. The hospitals were real. The scars were real. And the fact that basketball is what brought him back, that tells you everything about what the game meant to this kid. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't even a passion. It was oxygen. At Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland, Delonte didn't just play, he dominated. He averaged 20.2 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists, and 3.1 steals per game as a senior, earning Washington Post All-Met Basketball Player of the Year honors and leading the Raiders to their first ever state tournament appearance. Basketball wasn't just a sport for this kid. It was literally the reason he was still alive. Then came St. Joseph's University, and this is where Delonte's story goes from inspiring to legendary. He teamed up with Jameer Nelson to form what was widely considered one of the greatest backcourts in college basketball history. As a junior in 2003-04, he averaged 18.9 points and 6.7 assists per game, shooting an absurd 41% from three-point range. The Hawks went 27-0 in the regular season, undefeated, absolutely spotless, finished 30-2 overall, and made it all the way to the Elite Eight as a #1 seed. He even had a perfect 12 for 12 shooting performance for 33 points against Xavier that earned him National Player of the Week. We're talking about a kid who was cutting himself in children's hospitals a few years earlier, now hitting every single shot he took on national television. That's not just talent, that's survival instinct turned into superpower. The Boston Celtics took him 24th overall in the 2004 NBA draft, and suddenly, the kid from PG County, who used to prey on hospital floors, was in the league. Rookie year, he's learning from Gary Payton and Doc Rivers.
I had one of the best experiences a rookie can have. Gary Payton on my team, Paul Pierce, Doc Rivers coaching.
And those early years with the Celtics were formative. He was soaking up game, getting reps, learning how to be a professional at the highest level of basketball on earth. Then came the trade to Seattle, and eventually, the move that changed everything, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the way he tells it, it was almost too good to be true.
I was sitting out in Seattle. LeBron asked me, did I want to play for Cleveland? And I was sitting there like...
3 months later, he's the starting point guard on the Cavs, playing alongside the best player in the world. And honestly, he wasn't just along for the ride, he was performing.
For Cleveland, I was like, yeah. 3 months later, I'm starting point guard on the Cavs and throwing alley-oops to LeBron, and those memories that I'm gonna have to show my son and my other one on the way.
And then he dropped what might be the most self-aware, most perfectly Delonte West quote of all time.
I wasn't the man, but I was the man next to the man.
That right there, that's the kind of self-awareness that tells you this dude understood exactly what he was and what he brought to the table. During the 2008-09 season, West started all 64 games he played, averaging 11.7 points, 3.5 assists, 3.2 rebounds, and 1.5 steals, while shooting 45.7% from the field and a career best 39.9% from three. The Cavs went 66-16, a franchise record, and earned the Eastern Conference's #1 seed. In the 2009 playoffs, he elevated even further, averaging 13.8 points per game across 14 starts, including a 22-point explosion in Game 6 against the Orlando Magic. He hit a game-winning three-pointer against the Washington Wizards in the 2008 playoffs that remains one of the most clutch shots of that entire postseason. Delonte West, at his absolute peak, was the embodiment of everything you want in a role player. Efficient, tough, defensively disruptive, and capable of absolutely going off when the moment demanded it. He signed a 3-year, $12.7 million contract, and across his 8 NBA seasons, he earned roughly $16 million total. The kid who grew up happy poor was now a millionaire several times over. He had made it. The prayer on the hospital floor had been answered. But here's the thing about prayers. Sometimes the answer comes with conditions nobody warned you about. The unraveling. Everything you just heard, the comeback, the clutch shots, the franchise records, the millions, all of that was real. But underneath it, there was a ticking time bomb that nobody in the NBA, and barely anyone in Delonte's inner circle, truly understood. Because while Delonte West was draining threes alongside LeBron James, he was also fighting a war inside his own head that no amount of game winners could fix. In 2008, after a preseason scrimmage where he erupted in anger at a high school referee and felt an overwhelming urge to quit the team entirely, West sought help. A specialist in the DC area diagnosed him with bipolar disorder, and his reaction, completely, devastatingly human.
When I first got diagnosed with bipolar, my first response was, what does that mean? You know, I had to look it up on Google.
Think about that for a second. A grown man, a professional athlete making millions, getting a life-altering diagnosis, and having to Google it just to understand what it even means.
That's my first time ever hearing that. Never been told I had an emotional problem or something like that.
He took medication, including Seroquel, and tried to be open about it. He even planned a foundation to help young people with bipolar disorder. But what came next was a gut punch that nobody could have prepared him for. On September 17, 2009, Delonte was pulled over in Maryland on a 3-wheeled motorcycle for a minor traffic violation. What police found was staggering. 3 loaded guns, a 9mm Beretta in his waistband, a Ruger 357 Magnum strapped to his leg, and a Remington 870 shotgun in a guitar case, plus a knife. His explanation was surprisingly straightforward. He said he was relocating the weapons after his mother warned him that his cousin's children had found them in a closet. But the internet didn't care about context. The memes wrote themselves. The story he told about the medication making him drowsy that night, nobody wanted to hear it.
He prescribed me some medicine. On the night of the incident, that was my first time taking that medicine.
The medication hit him harder than he expected, and suddenly, he's driving around with an arsenal while barely conscious.
Once it kicked in, it just put me in a state of drowsiness that I never experienced.
He pleaded guilty to weapons and traffic charges, receiving electronic monitoring, unsupervised probation, 40 hours of community service, and psychological counseling. The NBA suspended him for the first 10 games of the 2010-11 season, and almost overnight, the narrative around Delonte West shifted. He went from clutch role player to that crazy dude with the guns on a motorcycle. Bill Simmons literally put him in the Tyson zone, that category of celebrities where literally nothing they do would surprise you anymore. People crack jokes on Twitter. NPR made a quip about his shooting guard role. The arrest also sparked some of the most unfounded, disrespectful rumors in NBA history. Rumors about a personal relationship with LeBron James's mother, which West has repeatedly and emphatically denied. But the internet doesn't need facts to run with a story, and the rumor became inescapable, a permanent stain on his public identity that followed him everywhere. And here's the part that really highlights how the NBA's locker room culture failed him. Former teammates later admitted they missed the warning signs, because in a league built on toughness and machismo, nobody wanted to be the one to say, hey, something's wrong with our guy. The tough guy culture meant vulnerability was weakness, and asking for help was soft. So Delonte suffered in plain sight while everyone around him looked the other way.
After that incident, all of a sudden, I became the boogeyman. If I'm not smiling today on the court, they say, oh, he didn't take his medicine today, or he's crazy.
And the stigma absolutely destroyed his earning power.
Of course, it affected my earnings. I was making $4-5 million a year, and then after that, every year I've been on a league minimum contract.
That right there is the part nobody talks about when they joke about athletes' mental health. The diagnosis didn't just affect his well-being, it literally cut his salary by millions. Every new team made him sit with a therapist before they'd even consider signing him, treating him like a liability instead of a human being going through something. But the financial hits were only the beginning. West earned roughly $16 million across his NBA career, but burned through it on lavish spending, poor investments, and tax issues. His first marriage ended in divorce in 2010, during the 2011 NBA lockout. This man, who had played alongside LeBron James on the best team in basketball just 2 years earlier, applied for a job at Home Depot, posted the application on Twitter like it was nothing. He worked at a furniture store. The guy who was throwing alley-oops to LeBron and draining playoff game winners was stocking shelves and moving couches. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, Delonte started to question whether the bipolar diagnosis was even accurate in the first place. By 2012 to 2014, he had stopped taking medication entirely. In a later interview, he reflected on it with a kind of painful clarity, saying he always doubted the diagnosis, but went along with it because he wanted to serve as a role model. He came to believe that the specialist hadn't fully considered the unique context of an NBA player's lifestyle, where sudden wealth could lead to impulsive spending that looks like mania, but is really just a 20-something with millions of dollars and no financial literacy. Instead, he attributed his struggles primarily to temporary depression, intense self-loathing rooted in childhood, and the unique pressures of professional basketball. Whether that reframing was accurate or a form of denial is something only Delonte and his doctors can answer, but it added another layer of complexity to a situation that was already impossibly tangled. He was waived by the Mavericks in late 2012 after multiple suspensions for arguments and absences following preseason losses. Brief stints overseas in China and Venezuela followed, journeyman moves that reeked of desperation more than ambition. A D-League comeback with the Texas Legends gave him one last shot at relevance. He averaged 14.8 points per game, but injuries ended even that. By 2015, his playing career was effectively over, and then came the images that shattered the basketball world. In February 2016, photos surfaced showing Delonte West barefoot in a hospital gown outside a Houston area Jack in the Box. In June 2016, images of him panhandling in Temple Hills, Maryland went viral. West initially denied he was homeless, claiming he was helping a quadriplegic man in his neighborhood, but more incidents followed, and by 2020, video emerged of him being beaten on a DC area highway while in handcuffs. A video so disturbing it reignited every conversation about how the NBA and its community treats former players. The pain of watching those viral clips wasn't just about Delonte, it was about the fact that he had named his son Cash after Cassius Clay and Johnny Cash, and specifically chose not to name him Delonte West Jr. because of the stigma attached to his name.
I named my son Cash after Cassius Clay and Johnny Cash, and his middle name is Delonte, but I didn't want to name him Delonte West Jr. just because of that.
That one hit different. A father who loved his son so much he wouldn't even pass down his own name because he knew what the world had done with it.
I don't want my son going to school and people making fun of him for something his daddy did.
And Delonte knew exactly what joke they'd make.
And he go to school and say, oh, didn't your daddy had sex with LeBron, mama?
The unfounded rumor that the internet turned into a punchline. Delonte had to live with the reality of his own child potentially hearing that in a classroom. That's not a meme. That's a man's life being weaponized for retweets and engagement. The cycle, 100 days and counting. If part 1 was the rise and part 2 was the fall, then part 3 is the part that will genuinely test your empathy, because this is the part where the pattern emerges, and the pattern is vicious, and the pattern has been repeating for years. After those 2016 panhandling photos went viral, the cycle that would define Delonte's post-NBA existence began to solidify. The mechanics of it were almost always the same. A mental health episode triggers substance use. Substance use leads to a public incident or arrest. The incident goes viral. Someone intervenes. Brief sobriety follows, and then relapse hits, often rapidly, often publicly, often in the most heartbreaking way possible. And the substances weren't just alcohol or weed. We're talking about a polysubstance nightmare that escalated over the years. According to people close to him, Delonte's drug use progressed from the prescription pills he'd been on since his teenage hospital stays to alcohol and embalming fluid, formaldehyde-laced cigarettes known on the street as wet, and eventually to opioids, as confirmed by the multiple Narcan reversals in later years. This wasn't recreational use. This was a man in profound psychological pain, reaching for anything that would make the noise in his head stop even for a few hours. And by 2023, he was reportedly living outside a 7-Eleven in Alexandria, Virginia, completely disconnected from the support systems that had tried repeatedly to pull him back. Enter Mark Cuban. In 2020, after panhandling videos in Dallas surfaced, Cuban personally intervened. He picked Delonte up from a gas station, funded rehab at the Rebound Institute in Florida, provided a hotel room, and helped reunite him with his mother. By January 2021, West was actually working at the rehab facility, a legitimate he's turning it around moment that gave everyone hope. But then, the cycle reset. Cuban later opened up about the heartbreak of trying to help someone who keeps self-sabotaging, and the pain in his voice was unmistakable.
Brutal, right? Because I thought we had him. I thought we had him turned around.
Cuban described sending Delonte to a farm-like rehab setting connected to former NBA player Jason Williams' program in Florida, and for a while, the updates were positive.
You know, we sent him down to Jason's place down in Florida, and it's like a farm, Jason Williams, and you know, he's making progress, sending pictures.
But then came the devastating pivot, the moment every person who's loved someone struggling with addiction recognizes.
Dante's emailing me, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're getting this. Then Dante throws his shit over the fence, disappears.
They brought him back. Same thing happened again.
Making progress, this is it. Same shit. Only so much you can do.
And Cuban summed up the reality of mental illness and addiction with the kind of bluntness that only comes from watching someone you care about destroy themselves repeatedly.
Mental illness is real. It is real, and you just don't wish it away. You don't just rehab it away.
That last line is the one that needs to sit with everyone watching this. You don't just rehab it away. You can throw money at it. You can fly someone to Florida. You can give them a job and a roof and a support system. And sometimes, the person still has to want it bad enough to fight through the darkest parts of their own mind. And Delonte's fight has been relentless. The arrests kept coming, each one more alarming than the last. In October 2022, he was arrested trying to enter someone else's car in Fairfax County, Virginia. 4 misdemeanor charges, including vehicle trespassing and public intoxication. In June 2024, things escalated dramatically when he was arrested for violating release conditions and resisting arrest after a brief foot chase, then found unresponsive and revived with Narcan. The first dose of Narcan didn't work. He had to be transported to a hospital where a second dose was administered before he was finally revived. That's not just an overdose scare. That's a man being pulled back from the edge of death by a medication designed to reverse opioid effects and the first attempt failing. In November 2024, another trespassing arrest. Then, in November 2025, police found Delonte unconscious and not breathing on a roadside in Fairfax County. He was given Narcan again, and after refusing hospital care, was arrested for his own safety due to extreme intoxication. And then, in December 2025, in what might be the most gut-wrenching detail of this entire story, story, Delonte was arrested for allegedly assaulting and robbing a man of just $23 on Richmond Highway in Belle Haven, Virginia. $23. A man who once earned $16 million playing basketball allegedly robbed someone of $23. He was released on a $1,000 bond with a court date set for March 2026. His attorney called it a potential wake-up call.
My dog, Delonte. How you doing, my brother?
In that video, just a stranger on the street recognizing a former NBA player and asking how he's doing, captures something that statistics and arrest records can't. This is a real human being, someone's father, someone's son, someone's teammate. But here's where we end this story. Not with the arrests, not with the viral clips, not with the mugshots, but with something that matters more than all of it. Because Delonte West, at 42 years old, stood in front of a camera in late March 2026 and said something that everyone who's been following this story has been desperate to hear.
We out here in Florida. Uber just pulled up Cadillac. We out here with Wellness and Fitness Performance, Dr. Belly.
He looked healthier than he'd looked in years, present, aware, focused.
Just got me right and tight. You know what I'm saying? Today I'm 100 days sober. You see they got me right. See I'm out here right tight.
100 days sober. That's the longest reported sobriety stretch Delonte West has had in years. And yeah, we've been here before. The hope, the comeback narrative, the cautious optimism, and maybe the cycle repeats. Maybe it doesn't. But right now, in this moment, at 42 years old, the kid who prayed on a hospital floor in Cumberland, Maryland is still fighting. And Delonte's story doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of a much bigger, much uglier conversation about what happens to athletes when the lights go off and the crowd goes home. Kevin Love had a panic attack mid-game in 2018 and wrote about it in the Players Tribune, blowing the lid off the stigma around mental health in the NBA. DeMar DeRozan tweeted, "This depression get the best of me," and started a movement. Even Paul Pierce has talked about battling depression and anxiety after being stabbed 11 times early in his career. These guys, all-stars, champions, millionaires, all dealt with the same darkness Delonte dealt with. The difference is, most of them had support systems that held. Delonte's kept cracking. Former NBA coach John Lucas once estimated that nearly 10% of NBA players may deal with bipolar disorder, and that medication can be life-saving. But the league culture for decades made it almost impossible for players to seek that help without being labeled soft or unreliable. Delonte was one of the first to go public back in 2008, before it was normalized. And the backlash he received for that openness arguably made everything worse. He tried to be vulnerable in a league that wasn't ready for vulnerability, and the system punished him for it. That's the same grit that got him through children's hospitals, the same fire that took him from PG County to St. Joseph's to the NBA, the same thing that made him say he wasn't the man, but the man next to the man. Delonte West's story is not over. And if you take anything away from this, let it be this. Mental illness is not a meme. Addiction is not a punchline. And the people we turn into viral content are real human beings fighting battles most of us can't even fathom.
There's so much attached to my name, but I just want to show the world, I want to show the NBA how much of a better player and person I am.
He still wants to show the world, and at 100 days sober, he's still showing up. That's not tragic, that's a fighter. Thanks for watching. Click the videos on screen for more content.